All right, I've asked you to look at videos of plays, seen from a play by David Ives, and other videos about Wagner's Parsifal, and I wanted to discuss a little bit the significance of viewing these videos. David Ives is a very well-known playwright in New York City, primarily famous for his one-act plays. He's very good in a small format of one act, although he has done some bigger projects, and most recently his project on Broadway has been an adaptation of a novel from the 19th century called Venus and Furs, but he's also done translations of other well-known plays, and had a very active career for the last 30 or so years on the New York theater scene, but famous primarily for his one-act plays. And I ask you to look at a bunch of videos of different performances of the same one-act play. And the reason for that is I wanted you to see how differently the same scene can be interpreted by different actors in a different setting, a different environment. The words are the same, but the performances are clearly very different. And that's something that's emerged really prominently since the 1960s, insofar as we no longer accept that there is this standardized or idealized way of performing the text. There can be good ways of performing it, but the emphasis is always on a new way of performing it, an innovative way of performing it, rather than reaching some kind of perfect performance that meets a standard that's somehow understood. Generally speaking, in the earlier decades, way back into the 19th century, there was this standardized way to perform. There was this sort of code or way of reaching a scene or character that was the best, and all performers strove to achieve it. Not so since the 60s, where the text is not a source of stability and a way of unifying different personalities and performers under a standardized way of performing. Rather, the text is a source of instability, an opportunity for a different way of using words and opportunities to perform. So I want you to bear that in mind when working on your own your video projects and looking at the way in which theater, as you encounter it, how you respond to it, and understand the varieties of interpretation, so to speak, that are possible with any text. And how do you evaluate, when there's no standard, how do you evaluate the performance experience? What sort of qualities or expectations do you put in play to determine how well the performance works? Obviously, some of these Ives pieces aren't, the performances you saw in video, some of them don't work for me at all, but I want you to be more conscious of what's expectations or what process of evaluation you apply to determine which performance works best for you. Now, then we had the Wagner videos, scenes from Wagner's Parsifal. Richard Wagner was one of the towering figures of the 19th century, the creator of this form of theater called music drama. Wagner envisioned a theater that brought all the arts together, Gesamtkunstwerk, as he called it, the total work of art. And he treated theater as almost like a religious experience. The theater was like a temple and a sacred kind of experience, and Parsifal was perhaps the the most full expression of this kind of religious approach to art, even though Wagner himself was not a religious man in the conventional sense. Anyway, Parsifal was his last work. He completed it shortly before he died in 1882. And at that time, he had created this special theater devoted entirely to his works, Bayreuth, in southern Germany. It's a beautiful theater, unique in its architecture insofar as he changed the way the audience sat and created these conditions for the perfect realization of his operas. And every August, the Bayreuth Theater puts on the Wagner Festival. It lasts about a month. It's one of the most cherished theater events in the year throughout the world. It's very difficult to see Wagner operas unless you order them like many years in advance. And the whole atmosphere is one of tremendous ceremony and glamour and concentration of all these elites from around the world. This is a very special occasion. But the Bayreuth is meant to operate as the standard for production of Wagner's music dramas or operas. And it represents the investment that mainstream society puts toward theatrical experiences. This is very institutionalized, huge budgets, enormous resources. Nothing in theater demands as much in the way of money and resources as opera, and Wagner demands more than opera of any other kind. And sort of sets the highest limit or the highest level of caring about theater that you can imagine. It's really big and extraordinary, as opera is throughout the world. But Wagner's Bayreuth theater is really you might say, the ultimate in big deal theater. And yet, I asked you to look at 2 videos, one of which is a Bayreuth production of Parsifal, and you see the scale of production values put towards the theatrical experience in Parsifal. And yet, what you see on the stage is not what Wagner envisioned. Those working in Bayreuth closely with the descendants of Wagner's family, because it's still the case that the Wagner family exerts great influence in the Bayreuth experience. But here, the directors of Wagner's operas have made choices that Wagner himself never imagined, and they have gone way beyond what Wagner prescribed in the libretto for the music drama, and created a different experience than Wagner ever intended. And I asked you to look at the version at the National Opera Theater in Tallinn, Estonia. And you can see they don't have quite the resources that Bayreuth has to support production of Parsifal. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting scene. They've done the same scene that you saw at Bayreuth at the National Theater in Tallinn, and done it differently. And it has its own special qualities and charm and excitement, even though the video's a bit crude, having been shot by a spectator out in the audience. But it does show they've seen the opera differently, the same text, the same music, everything's the same in the score and the libretto, but the world you see is quite different. So that's the point of seeing these two, the Ives video and the the Wagner videos. I want to make that point very strongly, how much the performers, directors shape the theatrical experience independently of the text, and even though they are not fighting the text, but they're bringing something else out of it that was never intended, and that's a point that needs to be made very strongly in relation to the development of theater since the 1960s. And that's why we'll be talking more and more throughout this course about the role of performers, directors, designers, and even audiences in shaping the theatrical experience beyond whatever authors bring to it. Okay?